Okay, people. Oh God, I turned the volume too low. Let me check something. I couldn't tell if it was recording. All right. Imagine if I said this whole thing and didn't record it. Can you imagine? You'd have to because you wouldn't know because it wouldn't be recorded. What do I have for ye today? Well, I have The Hunt for the Red October by Thomas Clancy. Yeah. I like this little copy too. It has, I don't know if you can see it. It has like an imprint of like some Soviet crap on here. Very cool. Okay, before I go too far, the usual question answer portion of our videos. Why did I get it? Um, well, there's 10,000 billion Tom Clancy books out there, and I want to see what the fuss was about. And it's a very well-known book, so I snatched it. Right? Can't blame me for that. My ranking. This one's a tricky one. This one's a tricky one. I'm going to say a 3 out of 5. I think it sits right where it sits, but in the but there's nothing too, let's say, unmissable about it, right? It's very, very good, but if you're not feeling it, it might not scratch the itch, so to speak, we readers have, right? 3 out of 5 is what I'm going to go with. I think it's extremely fair. If you do read it, if you're inclined for anything nautical, navy, spy, even political, right? If you're sort of into some political stuff, even if you're into some biographies, you take a break, hit this book up, you'll be very satisfied. If you're like, you know, way deep in fairyland, you only want to talk about elves, this ain't for you right now. Give it a while. Don't read it right now. Wait till the mood finds you. That's what I'd say. All right, now what I should do, but I always forget, is a spoiler warning because I'm going to go through the rest of this book and say what I want to say, and it'll probably spoil the book for you if you haven't read it. It's a big deal for some people, and for some people apparently they could care less. I don't know how those people function, right? I don't want books spoiled for me, but it is what it is. So there it is. Spoiler alert from here on out. What you got's what you're getting. Oh, how much does it cost? I can't say this book's more than I got it on sale on Kindle for like $2, right? It's this one was like at a Goodwill for like $1. I think you get it brand new, $9, $5. It's very cheap. It's very available. If you hunt it around a little bit, you get it for very, very little. So in that sense, 1,000 times worth it. All right, so if you're inclined to go read it, off that minimalist recommendation, which would be enough for me, go ahead. We'll talk to you later. Are they gone? All right. This book begins like flat out with it gets right into it. No prologue, no nothing. I don't even think we have chapter names. What this book does is the chapter names are days. Day 1, day 2, and on we go. And so in that sense, you as you kind of lose track of time, which is kind of how it'd be in a submarine, you kind of re-remember. You are re-reminded of the time by the chapter titles. It's a very cool, very slick way to write that out. And it's also it condenses it for you, right? So As you take in this sort of chunk of information, because the way he likes to do it is he jumps, right? He'll jump from the Kremlin to Washington to the sub to another sub. And sometimes it's just not even half a page in the sub. Bounce around, and then at the end, this whole chapter was a day, and in your mind, it condenses. It was very cool. Works very well. Um, we start with our hero, our protagonist. It gets very confusing. Captain Marco Ramius. And he is getting his submarine out of an icy port in Ruski land, right? And he's having this conversation with a what are they called? Oh, I wrote it somewhere. Hold on, give me a second. Zampolit. He writes it sort of the Ruski style, not in Cyrillic, but in how it would sound. The Zampolit. Right? And these are, again, you got to go back. I think this was written in the 80s, maybe before. Before the fall of your friendly neighborhood Soviet Union. Right? Behind the Iron Curtain, things were different. And here is another part of just the sparkling glory of this book. It's one half story, and then the other half is this magical world building. And what do I mean by that? Normally, you think world building, you think fantasy. It applies here too. Most of us will never have lived in Soviet Russia. Most of us will never be in the armed forces of any kind, right? Most of us never been in the CIA, never had to deal with the CIA. And he uses each of their stories to let you live in these worlds for a little bit, right? So when he's talking about Marcos here, you are in Soviet Russia. This Zampolit is a guy who is there on the ship sent from the government to make sure everyone is as communist as they're supposed to be. And you're like, well, what's the big deal? It'd be like if someone goes to your work and doesn't do any work, but they watch you. And if anyone says any kind of comment about Joe Biden sucks, they whisper to the higher ups, and then there's a knock on your door, and you get shipped off to, Antarctica or Siberia, or you get dead. Like, actually, they'll kill you and your family, or your town just doesn't see your family anymore. This is kind of how things were going in Soviet Russia. I'm not even joking. And this is sort of like, it's not biography, right? These people aren't real. But he writes it with all the rules of biography. As in, aliens aren't going to show up and suck the life out of this man. It's not realistic. But a Zampolit, a family getting disappeared, these sort of things are very realistic in the 60s and 70s and some of the 80s for Russian citizens. Even citizens in the armed forces. No one was immune to this. You'd have their highest clan. What did they call them? The Politburo. Politburo. I think that's the name. Were the ones running the country. They might oust each other if they got the chance and make them disappear and put someone else in the spot. Full on. It's pretty vicious. So he gives us this world building in Mother Russia. And in the midst of the world building, we have this interesting story because it doesn't take too long with use of inner monologue, which I really like, for our captain to say, to sort of express his dislike of the Zampolite and to say, I shouldn't be too mean to him. He's not going to make the trip. And I'm like, you mean you're going to kill him? And that's exactly what they do. He kills this guy before we're out of the chapter. By the end of the day, by the time they're underwater and underway, kills this guy. This guy kills Dad. And I'm like, what the crap is happening here? Right? Because that's another trick. Use of a major event to, let's say, fill the sails of your boat. Right? Like, it's a normal day, but all of a sudden someone saw something really like demonic. That action gives your story for the reader tremendous momentum. It fills those sails, and you can go with great speed way down the line before I get back to wanting to be fed again as a reader. So using a murder most foul to give you that momentum is very smart. And bad books will do this and then, let's say, try and go too far on it and then it falters. He does not. He immediately goes to the next thing, right? Next he sends a mysterious letter to the higher ups. And we get another taste of Soviet Russia because the mail's not going to go on time, obviously. And the higher ups are going to get their mysterious letter later than they would have gotten it. And here's another thing he does. It's two things, really. Elements happen outside of your control, right? Like, let's say, because he'll have a terrorist plot in his book, right? Well, the terrorists didn't account for traffic in Baltimore. This is realistic. You might get caught in traffic. It might mess up the timing of your plan. These things are real, right? Now, maybe it's not as major as traffic. Maybe it's just a random guard, a broken elevator, and you have to take the stairs. These little things happen in real life, and he peppers them in his books. Not overly. He doesn't overdo it. But they're there. And if they weren't there, you'd notice it. I think Napoleon said this once. And he was talking about, like, don't worry too much about the fight. He goes, all these great battles are always decided by a rabbit spooking a horse or a foot getting caught in a root. Right? Napoleon said something to this effect. And it's true. When you look at I bet if you looked at Gettysburg, somewhere in there is a lookout who got like sick the night before or drunk, guards getting drunk. Some kind of small thing that can tip the balance of the whole battle. These things happen in real life repeatedly too. Repeatedly. Looking this way instead of that. You deployed your tanks here instead of there. Little things can affect these big battles. And he puts these little things in here. He also does another thing that I really like. And he does it in a few spots. But he does it first with this letter. He doesn't tell me, the reader, what's in that letter. Right? And on the one sense, it's supposed to drive your curiosity, which it does. But in the other sense, and this is the part I like the best, it affects our characters in book, in lore, so to speak, a certain realistic way. Right? So if you're actually Captain Ramius and you've sent this letter, you can't know what's exactly going to happen or when it's going to happen because you don't know if they've read it yet. In your mind, you go, if they read this letter, these things will happen. But I don't know when they'll happen or how. I'm now underwater in a submarine. Right? And to him, he knows what he wrote. So he's not in his mind thinking about how they will read his letter. He already knows what he wrote. He's thinking of the reaction, right? That's what you'd focus on. That's realistic, right? And it puts me, the reader, in his frame of mind, right? It puts me in his shoes. It's a very genius thing he does, and he does it a few more times in this book. Uh, bu- 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 okay, so the Ramius guy is supposed to be going into a war game. They have a new submarine, high tech, that they want to send against their other subs to see if they can catch it, right? To test how good and sneaky it is. Well, he just beelines it away from the test. But we have a lot of examples in the book of our submarines tracking these movements, because there was also in that Cold War era, our military was on high alert constantly. We never knew if the Russians were lying or if they were just setting up like an invasion. You had to go from prepare for a lie all the way to invasion of the East Coast, right? You had to, every contingency in between, you have to constantly be ready for. So our guys are sort of watching. We then cut back to Ramius. And here's another interesting thing he does. Thomas Clancy tells us why this character is doing what he's doing before he tells us what he's doing. And it's the same thing as the letter. The action's not on his mind, the reason's on his mind. Now, the reason is, again, a very Russian reason. Communist Russia. I don't know about now, but communist, Soviet, Ruski. He had a wife he loved. They never had kids. But in their way, he took all of his young officers as like his kids. And they took his wife like their mom, right? It's sort of a tight knit little social circle in this communist land. Nothing wrong. He never broke a rule. She never broke a rule. Officers never broke a rule. But one day she gets sick. She gets sick. She goes to the hospital. They don't have enough medicine because Russia can't produce enough medicine. And they can't import enough because it's expensive. And on top of that, the doctor showed up drunk. Right? And so one thing goes bad, another thing goes worse than bad. She dies. And you're like, well, got to get the doctor, right? No. The doctor's the son of a high ranking official, so no one can do anything. Just how it works in Russia. Soviet Russia. Right? And so that just like he snaps. He's like, I'm not about this anymore, and I'm going to do something to hurt them. We don't know what. Very cool. Not that she died, but that we don't know. Okay, then we're introduced to our hero again? Question mark. It's hard to say who's the main character here, to be honest with you. In a weird way, the boats are the main character, if that makes sense. But it's our hero Jack Ryan, right? And again, it gives us our world building sense of being in the CIA. How fast they work, how secretive they are. Even like it's Jack Ryan, an Admiral James Greer, and a former judge who they call the judge. And basically, Jack Ryan's not in the decision making phase here. He is an analyst. He gives them information and opinions, and they make a decision. And their decisions have ramifications, right? It's not like, let me get 50 guys in a room to decide if we're going to send this spy to blow this thing up, right? It'd be these two men in this one room. No one else. No one else is listening. They don't have to go to anyone else for permission. They don't even have to accept the consequences. They're going to set off a firecracker in Parliament and then what, right? Well, what is exactly what the CIA does, right? And what our Jack Ryan does. They have a bunch of analysts who will look at incoming data, right? Of all sorts, be it low crop yields, be it politicians having affairs with other politicians, right? From top to bottom, we grab all the information, they give it to these guys, and then they go, what do you think? And they'll give an opinion. And our Jack Ryan is supposedly good at seeing what other analysts don't see, right? So they bring him in and they want to ask him about this one, the Russian buildup, right, of all these ships, which they're pretty sure is a test, but they want to know, like, what are they testing, and then what will it mean afterwards, right? Like, if it goes, if it goes sideways, who's in trouble? How could that affect the power structure? On and on we go. They don't just want prognostication; they want, ramifications of the prognostications. And in it, they find and show him grainy footage of our Marcos's submarine. They know it's funky. They know it's different. They know it's huge, but they don't know anything else about it. So they want him to form some kind of opinion quickly, right? And that's where they start to come together. And then here, I don't know when this book was written. The 70s? No, not the 70s. I think it was in the 80s. 84? Written in 84. Published, surprisingly, now I just saw this particular one. Naval Institute Press. The Navy published this book. This is like Top Gun, but Navy. You see that? How cool is that? 84 this book was made. So, in 1984, this watch was stupid expensive. This was like a Rolex because it was a digital, right? They had VHS. They had horrible graininess. They needed massive rooms to make supercomputers, this kind of thing, right? And we get some sense of that. He needs to, like, okay, we have these grainy photos. He has a semi idea of what it is, and in his head, thinking through information, it's like a corkscrew inner propulsion. Makes almost no noise. And they're like, okay, if it's that, because we don't have one because we dropped that 2 years ago. How much noise would it make? How far could it get? On and on we go. Basically, could it be in our coast in 2 hours? I don't know how fast it goes. And then once you get a range, you get an idea, and then you make ideas off of those ideas. So he needs to go to his boy, a friend who's mathematically inclined, to make the algorithms to feed to the computer to test it out. He gives the guy access to the supercomputers run by the Army. Army's the only one that got them, other than like a few banks. Which is funny to me because I swear that room-sized supercomputer fits in your iPad now, right? Probably times two technology. And I mean, we're talking megabytes as a big deal, not gigs. It was a crazy world. Ba-ba-ba. Um, we end up with Jack Ryan again. He does this trick where Jack Ryan has an idea of what's happening, and then he gives us a sentence where he explains it to them. Then we cut to their reaction to it. So we don't get to know what Jack Ryan thought about what's going to happen. Again, and it sets us in this frame of mind that these people The CIA, the president, the armed forces, they have to operate under this presumption of a truth. They don't know for sure. We later learn that the presumption is he's going to give them this submarine, right? So, like, if we could get our hands on their secret submarine, we'll do a lot to get it. We'll pay a lot to get it. If we could buy it, we would. Can't buy that crap, right? And so when the Russian Navy loses its mind and sends out 10,000 ships just like beelining it without any secrecy towards our coast, that's when our Jack Ryan gets this idea and tells the higher ups. And then tells the higher ups of a way for us to take this like it's a wild idea for these people that a Russian captain would even want to give a sub up. So he's like, I can't know the guy's reason for doing it, but his actions, he gets a sense of who Ramius is from the intel, and he can determine an action that would equal this, right? Like, he wouldn't dive it into the sea and then blow it up. He's not suicidal. He wouldn't fly it down the Potomac River. He doesn't want fame, right? You could know these things about people from CIA intelligence. That's what Jack Ryan sort of tells the president. He's not any of these other things. So it's the only thing that makes sense between what we've seen and what the reaction is. Must be this. If not, it's a grand invasion and we're all going to die, right? That's basically what he tells them. So they have to sort of prep for both. We get constant looks at life on a submarine, though, as well. Not just a Russian sub. He gives us a look at 2 or 3 American subs that are also hunting, tracking all these other enemy subs, enemy boats. He gives us a great look at this. It's very fun to be in that world for a little while, right? I don't want to be live on a sub, but to be in it for a while is very fun. And he does a great job of it. It's way more complicated than you'd almost think. Because I'm always like, why does it need like 600 guys on a sub to run it? But it does. Cooks, mechanics, 24-hour sonar men, technicians to fix the sonar, technicians to fix the engine, technicians, and on we go. Right? Very cool. Here's another thing that he does. On our boy Ramius's Soviet ship, he faked a radiation leak. Now, in story, it's to make this crew, who he can't be sure all want to leave Russia, comply when the evacuation comes. But what it does for us as readers as well, it shows us what they would have to do on a submarine if there was a radiation leak. They're taking physical risk to test 10,000 little pipes, 10,000 nooks and crannies where pipes connect to see where the leak might be. Every hose, every twist of a knob, right? And it takes them hours with a little Geiger counter to test all the spots and see if we have any radiation leaks. It's very cool. But he does this another time too, where they have a tiny sub that they use for rescue. I didn't know this. If it was in the 80s, you know they got one now or better. The thing comes on and attaches, right, like with suction, to the ship, to whatever Russian, American. There's a spot. It finds an exit, suctions onto it. Then inside our rescue ship can open up, and they can, knock on the door literally. They'll open up, and you can take 25 guys out at a time. Then you seal everything back up, float them where you need to float them, come back, get another 25 guys. I did not know this was actually real. Very cool. I can imagine actually having to be rescued from a crashed submarine. It's got to be trippy. But they could do it if they needed to. The odds they're going to rescue very slim, obviously. You run out of air, whole ship implodes. But if you didn't die, they wouldn't leave you. Very cool. Our Navy's very cool. We cut to the White House every so often, and this shows us again world building how the Russian politics works. And in this time, Soviet politics was full of lies and deceit. I mean, they were sharp knives. They take every word you say and try and calculate out what you mean or twist it for some purpose of their own. So you had to like, even when our president brings up search and rescue, he has to like trap them into it so that he can say no. There's no way he can say no and save face or be exposed, because any kind of negative exposure to our ambassador from Russia could lead to him, getting ousted to Siberia, right? Because they constantly try and sell this lie that the Soviets were good, while constantly working behind the scenes of everything opposite of that lie, which would be the truth. They'll plot, they'll steal, they'll assassinate. They'll do all these dirty stuff. You really would. No lie. We have, it's a small part, but it's also fun. A senator who wants to be briefed on what all this rigmarole is, because I'm in the intelligence committee and I need to know, right? Where the senator is basically an idiot, and they placate him a lot. But in this instance, they're going to use him because they've had an idea of a leak in his office. Someone's sending out the intel that they give to them, which they don't want to do. Which, again, a side note, the CIA here, our boy Jack Ryan, Greer, and the judge have an asset called Cardinal. Cardinal being someone somewhere in Russia. And that's all the judge says. I think the judge knows whose it is, but he's the only one. And the level they go to maintain this man's secrecy is insane. He'll take like photographs, right? However, he got the photographs. He got them to our CIA, like in Britain or something. We then have one asset, one person by himself in his private photo developing basement. Just his own private one. He develops the film. Right? And then he will the film is like a note or something to this effect. It's a picture of a note, like you'd handwrite, I believe, and are still shots of the submarine, right? This guy will then transcribe not specifically what's said, the gist of it, right? So that if his letter is grabbed in between, you can't get it won't, what is it? Everyone writes their own way. Words, like someone will have a habit of using a certain word. I could identify who it is by those words. You can't even get that because it has now a filter between the actual words and the words you're reading because I have someone transcribe it. You know? And then one person carries that directly to our CIA guy who opens it and reads it and then destroys it right then. And so you have to just go with the judge's opinion on what was said and then look at those pictures. And he doesn't even want people talking about the route it takes. He doesn't want people talking the name Cardinal. He won't say anything other than the man's in Russia, because anything leaked anywhere out of the room of two people could start leading them towards who this is, and they don't want to lose the asset. So when the people are saying, You could figure this or that out. I mean, the CIA don't give its secrets out, people. If they don't want you to know, you're not going to know. So if you do know, you got to assume it's a lie for a reason, right? And just try and sort through the lie. Just FYI, they're not sharing state secrets here. Back to the senator. What they do with this senator is leak him bad intel so that they can find the leak, right? And the leak is one of his aides, who they then entrap and threaten with, you know, 40 years in prison, or you be a double agent and feed your dirty Russians bad information. And they're going to make him do this for an extended period of time, which if he gets caught, he dies. But what can he do? It's death or years in jail. But what they also do is make the senator quit his job. They're like, you have to stop. You have to bow out because they just don't like him. He doesn't vote the right way or whatever. And it's bow out or have the headline being your aide was a commie spy, which you'd lose anyway, right? So lose or bow out gracefully. We'll find you another gig, which is what they do. Politics is so dirty. We have a great like naval battle, a submarine battle at the very end because they get caught almost. Almost a perfect end for their plan, but they end up caught. It's a fun. It actually is very exciting. I know Jack Ryan doesn't die because I know he's in like 50 other books. But any kind of thing can happen when subs are fighting, and our Ramius could die, right? And he showed me that they can rescue people, so the sub could get sunk too, and Jack Ryan live, right? So the scale of bad stuff happening can be very wide. But they end up getting through it. And they end up going into like this, what it would be like if you defected, right? Because they don't know that everyone has a car. They don't know in America everyone has a house and everyone can go to school, not just the elites. They don't know about grocery stores and fruit 24/7. All these things were not real in Soviet Russia. The fact that you can wake up, go to a junior college that's local in your town, after class, go to the grocery store, grab a watermelon, and a ham, go to the park and eat it, and then go home and watch TV. That wasn't a reality for Soviet Russia, for the common man. You have to be a colonel, a high-ranking politician. Common people weren't treated this well. And it's fun. What's good to remember, right? There's a lot of history that's not just the 17th century, right? We've had crazy stuff happen. And at the time, the book hit because it's a good story, right? And as we go away from it, it starts to build this historical element, right? That adds to the fun of this book. It really is a solid 3. The end sort of just stops with Jack Ryan like having to do more briefings. So the world goes on, the spying never quits. This was just a moment in the man's life, right? A 5-day moment. But it really is a good book, right? So if you ever get the hankering for any kind of nautical nonsense, if for a second, you're like, I don't feel like reading right now, it may just be your genre, and give this a go, right? Give a change a go. And I think you'll really like it. Okay. Might be a short one. How long is this? That's a reasonable length. We're going to go into the ad portion of our show, which I know you all love the most. I'm going to say also what I should say every time, which is go buy the book. Go buy my book. Forget Tom Clancy. Don't forget Tom Clancy. It's a good book. But you can buy my books as well, right? You're supposed to ask for the sale. So, spend $4, buy my book. One of my books. Buy all of my books. You'll enjoy them. You'll tell me if you enjoy them or if you hate them. There's no pictures, right? So if you're here for this vlog for the pictures, there's no pictures in my books. It's all story, but they're fun. This book was fun too. Tom Clancy can write, and the style, that ping pong style of back and forth. I really wish he did a actual biography, like a history of World War One. It would work so well with his style of writing because history happens all at once, right? At the same time, Winston Churchill is eating this salad, Hitler is like making an army at the same time, right? So if you put them back to back and squish them together by chapter, you can really get a sense of it. Whew. This has been fun. These are fun. I'm going to keep doing them. All right. Thanks for listening. I go buy my books. I'll get money from that. Money I'll use to buy stuff. And you'll get enjoyment from a good book. You all love to read anyway. Read my books. Good looking out. Thanks for showing up. I will talk to you next week.